Number one, put God first. Put God first in everything you do. Everything that you think you see in me, everything that I've accomplished, everything that you think I have, and I have a few things, everything that I have is by the grace of God. Understand that. It's a gift. 40 years ago, March 27th, 1975, it was 40 years ago, just this past March, I was flunking out of college. I had a 1.7 grade point average. I hope none of you can relate. I had a 1.7 grade point average. I was sitting in my mother's beauty shop. They still call it beauty shops now? What they call it now? Yeah, I was sitting in the beauty parlor. I was sitting in my mother's beauty parlor, and I'm looking in the mirror, and I see behind me this woman under the dryer. And every time she looked up, every time I looked up, she was looking at me, just looking me in the eye. And I didn't know who she was, and I said, she said, somebody give me a pen, give me a pencil, I have a prophecy. March 27, 1975, she said, boy, you are gonna travel the world and speak to millions of people. Now mind you, I was flunked out of college. I'm thinking about joining the army. I didn't know what I was gonna do, and she's telling me I'm gonna travel the world and speak to millions of people. Well, I have traveled the world, and I have spoke to millions of people. But that's not the most important thing, the success that I had. The most important thing is that what she taught me and what she told me that day has stayed with me since. I've been protected, I've been directed, I've been corrected. I've kept God in my life, and it's kept me humble. I didn't always stick with him, but he always stuck with me. So stick with him in everything you do. If you think you want to do what you think I've done, then do what I've done and stick with God. Number two, fail big. That's right. Fail big. Today's the beginning of the rest of your life, and it can be very frightening. It's a new world out there. It's a mean world out there, and you only live once. So do what you feel passionate about. Take chances professionally. Don't be afraid to fail. There's an old IQ test, was 9 dots, and you had to draw 5 lines with a pencil within these 9 dots without lifting the pencil. The only way to do it was to go outside the box. So don't be afraid to go outside the box. Don't be afraid to think outside the box. Don't be afraid to fail big, to dream big. But remember, dreams without goals are just dreams, and they ultimately fuel disappointment. So have dreams, but have goals. Life goals, yearly goals, monthly goals, daily goals. I try to give myself a goal every day. Sometimes it's just to not curse somebody out. Simple goals, but have goals. And understand that to achieve these goals, you must apply discipline and consistency. In order to achieve your goals, you must apply discipline, which you've already done, and consistency every day, not just on Tuesday and miss a few days. You have to work at it every day. You have to plan every day. You've heard the saying, we don't plan to fail, we fail to plan. Hard work works. Working really hard is what successful people do. And in this text, tweet, twerk world that you've grown up in, remember, just because you're doing a lot more doesn't mean you're getting a lot more done. Remember that. Just because you're doing a lot more doesn't mean you're getting a lot more done. Don't confuse movement with progress. My mother told me, she said, yeah, because you can run in place all the time and never get anywhere. So continue to strive, continue to have goals, continue to progress. Number 3, you'll never see a U-Haul behind a hearse. I'll say it again. You'll never see a U-Haul behind a hearse. I don't care how much money you make, you can't take it with you. And it's not how much you have. It's what you do with what you have. We all have different talents. Some of you will be doctors, some lawyers, some scientists, some educators, some nurses, some teachers. Yeah, okay. Some preachers. The most selfish thing you can do in this world is help someone else. Why is it selfish? Because the gratification, the goodness that comes to you, the good feeling that I get from helping others, nothing's better than that. Not jewelry, not big house I have, not the cars, but it's the joy. That's where the joy is, in helping others. That's where the success is. Finally, I pray that you put your slippers way under the bed tonight, so that when you wake up in the morning, you have to get on your knees to reach them. And while you're down there, say thank you for grace. Thank you for mercy. Thank you for understanding. Thank you for wisdom. Thank you for parents. Thank you for love. Thank you for kindness. Thank you for humility. Thank you for peace. Thank you for prosperity. Say thank you in advance for what's already yours. That's how I live my life. That's why I am, one of the reasons why I am today. Say thank you in advance for what is already yours. True desire in the heart for anything good is God's proof to you, sent beforehand to indicate that it's yours already. I'll say it again. True desire in the heart, that itch that you have, whatever it is you want to do, that thing that you want to do to help others and to grow and to make money, that desire, that itch, that's God's proof to you, sent beforehand already to indicate that it's yours. And anything you want good, you can have. So claim it. Work hard to get it. When you get it, reach back. Pull someone else up. Each one, teach one. Don't just aspire to make a living. Aspire to make a difference.
When I came across that video this week, I was very touched by it. Keep God first. Don't aspire to make a living. Aspire to make a difference. And folks, that's what this message series has been about. This is our last week of it. And I have to tell you, of all the message series I've done recently, I think this one is I've been the most thankful to have had the idea to do and to share with you. Because when we make a difference, we really unite ourselves with the essence of who God is, who loved and cared for his creation so much that he was willing to come into this world through his Son and take the fullness of your sin and my sin upon his shoulders and to make a difference so that we now, though we're not able or worthy to be in the presence of God, that we now, even though we should have no hope, being eternally separated from God, have been united to God and a God who cared enough about you and I to make a difference. And God has called for each of us to make a difference in our own way. Whether it's Denzel Washington having the opportunity before a commencement ceremony a year ago to be able to make a difference and to say such powerful words. Or the people that we've looked at in the scripture that pretty much remain nameless. The donkey guy that gave the donkey for when Jesus entered into Jerusalem. No one knows his name. The person who had the upper room where they had their Passover feast. No one knows his name. To the prostitute that was essential for Israel to be able to defeat Jericho. To the servant girl who becomes the queen of the land and saves her people. We've been looking time and time again at people who in many respects are insignificant, who in many respects are nameless, but they were able to make a difference because God used them despite of any shortcomings that they had, and that God can use you, and that God can use me. And as we bring this series to a close this morning, we're not going to just look at one no-name person, one insignificant person that made a difference. This morning we're going to look at 400 people that are nameless, 400 people that many would describe as hoodlums, 400 people that were not accepted into society, in fact would have been considered the deplorable ones of their day. God used them to make a difference. Before I get into the story, though, I need to tell you a little bit of the backstory. And the backstory goes like this, and that is the first king over Israel was a man by the name of Saul. And God appointed him to be king over Israel. And Saul wasn't a horrible person. He wasn't a wicked person. But as his reign continued on, the main defect in Saul, amongst other things, is that he had a heart that sought to do what it was that he wanted to do rather than what God wanted him to do. And here's the deal with God, is that he doesn't expect perfection out of you and of me, but what he desires is to have a heart of someone who wants to make a difference, who's willing to walk in his will and walk in his ways. And so God's anointing upon Saul, his pleasure with Saul passed, and God went ahead and anointed a new king by the name of David. And that new king by the name of David was anointed king, but Saul didn't realize that David had been anointed king, and the people of Israel didn't realize it. So this David was a David that with a sling and a stone was able to defeat a giant by the name of Goliath when all the other soldiers in Israel quivered before this giant. And as David's days progressed from being a youth and defeating Goliath, David became a very well-recognized warrior in Israel. And one day, as David was walking in the presence of Saul, the people looked upon both David and Saul, and the people literally shouted out that Saul has slain the thousands, but David the tens of thousands. And when Saul heard that, immediately he was extremely jealous towards David. He felt threatened by David, and he began to hate David and went to try to kill him. And so David had to flee for his life. And God saved David's life. And God did some amazing things ultimately through David on the backs of 400 hoodlums, deplorable people of the day. Look at 1 Samuel chapter 22, verses 1 to 2. So David left Gath, and he escaped to the cave of Adullam. And when his brothers and his father's household had heard about this, they went down to David there. And all those who were in distress, or the ones who were in debt, or the one who were discontented, they gathered around David, and he became their commander, and it was about 400 men that were with him. Folks, these were the outcasts of society. These were the outlaws of society. These were the criminals of society, the bankrupt, the discontent, the people that were under pressure, the people that were just stressed out with life. They were the misfits, the deplorables. And through these 400 misfits and through these 400 outlaws, God saw worthy to use them to do amazing things. Not only were they able to evade a 6,000-person army that Saul had gathered to hunt David down, David and these 400 men were able to outmaneuver a 6,000-man army. But we also read in the scripture that they rescued an Israelite town that was being attacked by the Philistines. They would conduct raids on Philistine strongholds and villages and so forth with great success. And with 400 criminals and outlaws and broken individuals, God then ushers in who is going to be ultimately the greatest king in all of Israel. This, folks, is the God to whom we serve. That he's able to take when we look the lowest on the rungs of society and do great things. And I'm here to tell you that if God's able to use a prostitute, if God's able to use no-name people, servant people, all these different stories that we've heard, God's able to use you and I. And I hope you've been inspired by these messages. I hope you're not sitting there thinking, you know what, I'm not good enough. I'm not smart enough. I'm not faithful enough. I'm not this enough and that enough. The point of all this is you don't have to be enough. In fact, the less you are, the better you are. The less you're qualified, the more you're qualified. For you don't get much further down on the radar of society than 400 criminals who did an amazing thing for David and for the Lord in David's darkest days. I really think the challenge that we all have as we come in here and we process our life and we even process the things that I've said, as I said, make a difference, is that in the end, we just don't feel qualified. In the end, we just question whether or not that we truly can make a difference. I don't know, how many of you remember the days when you were looking for a job and you bought the newspaper and you looked at the classifieds? How many of you remember? See, yeah, and a lot of the young people, they're not raising their hands, right? But you remember how you felt when you got that newspaper and you're trying to find a job? You'd start reading the ad in the classified section, and as you read it, you started to just get that nauseous feeling in your stomach thinking, man, this one doesn't apply to me either. And you have to move on to the next one. And it was always so disheartening. Now, they don't do that nowadays. People don't look for their jobs in the printed classified section, but we do stuff like that. It's just more electronic now. And I went and I pulled an ad of what it's like to try to feel qualified, to try to feel good enough to get a job. And I just want to share it with you this morning because I think this is what we do with God. Now, incidentally, if any of you are looking for a job, I just pulled this a few days ago. It's up in Denton. And it's with FEMA, and the position is Emergency Management Specialist, all right? But let's just see how you feel as I go through this. Now, this position is located within Region 6 of the Recovery Division Public Assistance Branch, whatever that means. In this position, you will perform emergency management work, including managing and coordinating with other entities the recovery efforts from intentional or unintentional crisis, disasters, other humanitarian emergencies, hazards, or natural man-made technological, chemical, biological, radiological, nuclear, and high-yield explosive incidents. By the way, it pays $78,000 a year. Keep going. And if that wasn't intimidating enough, that for $78,000 a year, you're handling radiological incidences, to qualify for this position, an IC-12 level, your resume must demonstrate at least 1 full year of specialized experience equivalent to the IC-11 level in federal service. Now, the experience may have been gained in the federal government, it might have been in the state or local government, or the nonprofit organization, the private sector, or as a volunteer. However, your resume must clearly describe at least 1 year of the following specialized experience. Performing duties required to deliver public assistance programs to states and tribes and local jurisdictions and territories, such as supporting preliminary damage assessments, processing project worksheets, or providing overall support to new legacy disasters. Providing technical assistance in the grant closeout process, such as delivering guidance, briefings, and conducting analysis of closeout documentation provided by sub-grantees and grantees. Compiling and interpreting and analyzing workload data from a variety of sources, analyzing inspection reports, final vouchers, or audit reports for grant programs, and preparing recommendations for required follow-up actions. Experience refers to paid and unpaid experiences with volunteer work done through the National Service Program, Peace Corps, AmeriCorps, and other organizations, professional, philanthropic, religious, spiritual, community, student, social. Volunteer work helps build critical competencies, knowledge, and skills, and provides valuable training and experience that translates directly to paid employment. And you will receive credit for all qualifying experience, including volunteer experience. Your application must show that you meet all requirements for this position, and you may be found not qualified if you do not possess the minimum competencies required for this position. Now, how many of you are excited about that? It just brings me back to that day when you were reading the classified and you just went, bleh. And I think that when it comes to God, when it comes to making a difference, that so oftentimes we feel like we need to basically be God. You know, they need God for that position, and it only pays $78,000 a year. But what would it be? And what would it look like if God wrote a job description for what it was that he was looking for? And I think it would probably look a lot like this. This is God's want ad. I need someone who has a heart for me. Doesn't have to be an age limit. You don't have to have experience. No specific education required. In fact, you can speak any tongue. You can be from any tribe, and you can be from any nation. You can be male or female. You can have physical limitations. You're welcome. There is no mandatory retirement age. Wow. Now, we'd all be applying for that one, wouldn't we? That fits all of us. That's just refreshing. It makes us just feel like, wow, that would be a great place to work. And that's who calls us. That is what God asked for each of us to make a difference. He doesn't expect much. In fact, the less that we have, the better candidate that we are. Look at 1 Corinthians chapter 1, 26 to 28. Brothers and sisters, think of what you were when you were called. Not many of you were wise by human standards. Not many of you were influential, and not many of you were of noble birth. But you see, God has chosen the foolish things of this world to shame the wise. God has chosen the weak things of this world to shame the strong. And God has chosen the lowly things of this world and the despised things and the things that are not to nullify the things that are. What a beautiful God that you and I serve. Not many of us were influential or of noble birth. And our God doesn't want that, because our God takes the foolish things of this world to shame the wise and the weak things to shame the strong. You're good enough to make a difference. You see, God equips those he calls. And contrary to us thinking that we are not qualified or we're not good enough, God actually prefers the opposite. He says, my grace is sufficient for you, for in fact, my power is made perfect in your weakness. So the beautiful thing is, wherever you're at and whatever is going on in your life, the weaker you are, the better qualified you are to make a difference and to impact another person's life. And if you're going through crud in your life right now where you're just trying to keep your head above water, if you're feeling really bad about things that have happened in your past and decisions that you've made, if you're feeling uncertain about what your future holds and whatever it is, the weaker you are, the more God can use you. Because you see, God doesn't demand perfection. He just demands a heart to walk in his ways. He can use you right now wherever you're at to do some amazing things. But you know what? You may not get recognized for any of them. And you know what? For the last 2 months, we've been looking at a lot of people in the Bible who did some amazing things, and they're nameless. And I don't know about you guys, but when I think of my life, and I even think about the end of my life, I don't need my name to be remembered. But if God's name can be remembered through me, that's what matters. How can you make a difference? I don't know. I didn't think you could do it through a commencement speech. That hadn't crossed my mind until I saw what Denzel Washington said this week. It might be with a neighbor who has some limitations. It might be with an elderly person who just needs someone to talk to. It might be going to the next city hall meeting and opening your mouth and saying something. I don't know, folks. But God has placed each one of us in unique situations, in very normal and in everyday ways we can make a difference, and we can make a huge difference and never even realize it. The beautiful thing about making a difference in other people's lives is when we make a difference in other people's lives, we also make a difference in our own. I encourage you, my friends, listen to God's voice, follow Him. And the more beat up you are, and the more broken that you are, know that the more that God can use you. Go and make a difference.
When we're laying on our deathbed, you're not going to worry about how much money you had, how much power you had, how much prestige. You're going to see that that was all game, that was all an illusion. The only thing that's going to matter is the impact you had on other people's lives.
We are all on a separate journey. But the beautiful thing about our life here on this earth is at my funeral, they ain't going to talk about my success. They're going to talk about who Nick was and how Nick lived and how Nick loved and encouraged.
Success is incredibly important, but even more important than success, it's having an impact. It's knowing you haven't walked the planet in vain. It's knowing that because you've been here, you've blessed lives, you've developed people, and you have made the world a better place.
The effect you have on others is the most valuable currency there is. Everything you gain in life will rot and fall apart, and all that will be left of you is what was in your heart.
Life is a mirror, and life gives us not what we want. Life gives us who we are. When you were born, you cried while the world rejoiced. Live your life in such a way that when you die, the world cries while you rejoice.
Let your light so shine before others that they might see your good deeds and give glory to God in heaven. Make a difference.